also have a brand new case that's underway. It is in jury selection right now. This is Georgia versus Tiffany Moss. This is the stepmom of young Imani Moss, the 10-year-old who starved to death. And if that wasn't bad enough, when Dad realized she was dead, he thought maybe I can help by covering it up. He takes the body and tries to burn it in a trash can, fails at that, and ultimately calls the cops and says, hey, here's what happened. But he's not on trial. Why is he not on trial? Because he took a deal. He said, I'll plead to the charge, life in prison, no parole, just take the death penalty off the table, and they did. But going to trial will be his wife, the stepmother, Tiffany Moss. We have our own Vincent Hill down in Georgia. He's been sitting in the courtroom watching this jury selection, which had to be fascinating when you consider a number of things here, Vincent. Number one, the gruesomeness of the crime. Number two, the defendant representing herself. And number three, it's a death penalty case. What are you seeing down there, Vincent?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. So the big thing, and one of the reasons jury selection is taking so long, most of the jurors, of course, have come in and told the judge, hey, I oppose the death penalty. Earlier this morning when I was in the courtroom, juror number 92 said, hey, I'm an ordained minister. I believe in redemption, not death. There was another lady just before her that also said she's opposed to the death penalty as well. So you have that going on. You have a lot of potential jurors saying, hey, I'm opposed to the death penalty. But then you have a lot of jurors as well, Michael, questioning why she's actually defending herself. Like you said, this is a death penalty case. She could face either life with parole, life without parole, but more importantly, death, capital punishment, and she's defending herself. And a lot of people have said, hey, I just don't understand that. If that was me, that's not something I would do. But of course, the state has to remind them that, hey, this is her right to do that. So jury selection is moving kind of at a snail's pace at this point. I know the judge wants 58 of the required 54 jurors. They're up to 46 at the time. Around 1 o'clock this afternoon, they were up to 46 that were confirmed. So they expect that to end today, and hopefully they can actually start striking jurors late tonight or early first thing in the morning.
So they started with a huge pool, as they normally do, and there's a jury commissioner that figures out the kind of case, what they might need. They bring this big pool in, and then now they're whittling away at that pool, right, Vincent? And they're getting to folks that are death qualified. From that, they'll do the normal voir dire, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to most people being opposed to the death penalty. There was one juror that was excused today when I was there, for obvious reasons. She said, look, I'm opposed to the death penalty. I'm not God. So they asked for her to be excused. Of course, you have your typical jurors that are being excused for language barrier issues. I saw that while I was there this morning. He just didn't understand the line of questioning from the state. So she asked for him to be excused immediately. So, of course, you're going to get that with any jury selection. But, this case, from what I understand, they're expecting the trial to last about 3 weeks. There was one person that's a student who says, listen, I have final exams next week. I can't miss final exams. One lady said, hey, my husband's going out of town for work in the coming weeks, so I can't be tied to this trial for this long. So it's just taken a while to select this jury.
Yep, and understandable. Vincent, I have here with me in the studio Imran Ansari. Let me ask you this question. This is the Sixth Amendment right to counsel or right to represent yourself. But what kind of issues does it open up? Potential appeal, ineffective counsel? I mean, especially at a capital case. What do you expect to see coming out of this?
Right. So when you have a pro se defendant like this going pro se in her defense, it's going to raise a lot of issues, and particularly with the prosecution. The prosecution wants to get a conviction that sticks. They want to get a result that's not going to be overturned on appeal. When you have a pro se defendant defending themselves who is not an attorney, there's going to be a lot of issues, whether it be evidentiary, presentation of evidence, that are going to come up. The prosecution needs to be cognizant not only of proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt, but also of almost protecting the defendant's due process and not overstepping the bounds, not giving the appearance that they're sort of taking advantage of a pro se defendant, because you don't want that conviction, if it's gotten, to be overturned on appeal. So it's a very complex situation.
I can see, I mean, for the judge involved, for the attorneys involved. Vincent, you may have seen there were a couple of attorneys that were representing this defendant. She basically fired them when they pressed her to take the same kind of deal that her husband took, which was life without the possibility of parole, take the death penalty off the table. She said, no thanks, I'll represent myself. But the judge said, hey, those attorneys are going to stick around as advisory counsel. Have you seen them interacting at all? What's their role at this point?
Well, they haven't been interacting with her. I was there Friday, Michael, and of course I was there this morning. I mean, she walked in like she was Johnny Cochran. She had her notebook, she had her legal books. You know, she's sitting at the table by herself. Those defense attorneys are sitting behind her. But, you know, when the judge asks a question, he asks it directly to Mrs. Moss, and she gives her answer. She really hasn't actually communicated with those attorneys. Now, one thing that's interesting, Michael, when I was sending out tweets earlier today from the courtroom, one person actually replied, and maybe there's a method to her madness, if you will. One person actually replied, I don't know if I could give someone the death penalty if they represented themselves. So maybe she's hoping there's a lot of people, at least 12 in this case, that have the same mindset with that.
Wow, and assuming they're not honest about that in the voir dire, and you know, they keep that to themselves and end up not being able to impose the death penalty. Vincent Hill, thank you so much. It is so important to be able to watch this process as it unfolds in a case this unique. Thanks, Vincent. I'm sure we'll be checking in with you.
I should be in the courtroom tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you, sir.